is going to vary based on every country, based on every project. So I don't know if that quite addresses your question, but I think there's just, given the amount of data that we're looking at, I think there's a number of different ways to define success. It sometimes just helps to start with some small steps along the way, and then build from there.
I actually wanted to echo what Nick said. In some environments, in some contexts, some very basic outputs, in our case, pages read that would otherwise not been read, or books read. A number of times that a kid logged in and responded to a comprehension-related question that a teacher probably are all part of our organization, but we want to get to the point where those very basic outputs pique some curiosity to prepare for that next step, so that we get to the stage where we can do some your randomized control trial or whatever, so that maybe persuade a funder or maybe persuade someone to adopt it, this is really right. And each different design application very basic outputs.
I can imagine if you go to a country that has no data, then the first step is trying to find some baseline. You know, if they have nothing to work from, then step one is the baseline, so that you can use it for success of up.
Yeah, actually, just to add to the comment you just added, I just want to mention that in developing countries, there oftentimes are organizations that put together a forum for development organizations. So that is a great place to start for a team like that, especially in countries that don't have it.
That's great. All right, any other questions? We'll go in the back there.
Yeah. Bill, my question is, most of what we heard about is about developing countries. But if I take a look over the last 20 years, most of the developed countries have gone downhill for a large segment of the population. The German government just released statistics last year that says 20%, 1 out of 5, of the school children in Germany can no longer read. I heard from Denmark a similar number, and the estimate is that at least twice that percentage is really not even getting an education. So I'd be interested in any insights here, and perhaps Nick was the one that might have more of those in terms of observations of what's happening in the development.
So I'm just going to, Nick, did you hear the question?
I think I heard most of it. If I'm correct, it was mainly that we talked a lot about developing countries, but that developed countries have had their own challenges as well. In fact, a lot of developed countries are declining in performance. Is that about right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, was the question directed at me?
He did at the end mention your name because you're in UK, so that if you have thoughts around it, but of course, yes.
Sure. Well, looking at what we see here in the UK, again, I think I heard the question mentioned Germany, and I haven't worked in Germany myself, so I can't speak to it from personal experience. But certainly looking at the UK, I can say that we see the same challenges that we see in the US, where we have lots of technology. Even if it's, in my opinion, still has a way to go as far as evolving and catching up to some of the standards and best practices. There's still a lot of technology here. There's still a lot of resources here. It's obviously a developed country, so it has all that over to it. But like many other developed countries, it does have its fair challenges. You have, interestingly enough, in the UK, it's a country that's very, very concerned with ranking schools and ranking students. One of the popular things here gets a lot of media attention every year are the league tables, and this is basically a nationwide ranking of all schools, and also breaking those into their cities or local education authorities. And the government is very, very keen to get into schools that are failing, and actually there's a governing body here called Ofsted, which goes out to schools and inspects them on a somewhat regular schedule, but goes out and basically ranks schools, tells them where they're failing, tells them where they're struggling, and gives them a rating of struggling all the way up to good and outstanding. And these schools sort of live and die by these ratings, which is caused a lot of conflict here. There's a lot of challenges here around that, and so I guess coming back to the question, there are schools here that are struggling. The schools that have a lot of technology, schools that are using a lot of tools, schools that if you just look at the numbers, you can say, actually, no, they should be doing really well because they're following all the right steps. They're adopting all the technologies that everybody says they should be doing. You know, they're even diving in and doing new stuff with MOOCs and throwing all the buzzwords at it, but they're still struggling. And I think the reality is that there's still something we have to figure out about how and what role data really plays in education. The big data question here is a great one because we'll look at all the data that we're simply gathering on schools. There's a great quote from Larry Page, and for many of you have heard it, but it's about the amount of data that's created globally every 2 days being equivalent to all the data from the beginning of time in 2003. It's sort of it's tossed around a lot, but I think it's a good one because it sort of puts into perspective all the data that exists just across the globe and how we haven't begun to think about how that actually gets leveraged in education in a really meaningful way. I think it's a really big question. And so those schools that are struggling, I think what we have to start looking at is how do we rethink some of the models we've come up with? How do we rethink what defines success? How do we rethink assessment? How do we rethink what a data-driven classroom looks like? How do we rethink it in a way that capitalizes on all of this data and helps students succeed? So I don't know if that quite answers the question, but I suppose at the very least, I think it's worth acknowledging that no matter what technology we're putting forward, there are still some fundamental questions we have to ask about the role of technology and the role of data and what it really means to use it to help a school improve, to help students succeed.
Harlan and Justin, any additional thoughts in terms of the question, which is adoption of ed tech tools in the developed world and the challenges around that?
Yeah, well, I can definitely speak to the development world and challenges with big data. I currently am an associate director of IT at Common Schools. It's a charter school organization. We have 32 schools here on the East Coast. And one of the biggest challenges is finding a way to effectively track student data. And what measurements do you look at, right? There's this thing called data proliferation. And it's the challenge where you have so much data, but which data do you look at? And which data do you effectively choose to change in your teachers, in your staff? And so that's what we are doing at Common Schools. We have created a data warehouse that pushes the information from our student information system into a device where teachers and staff members can go and look at their performance. So a staff member at the school will look at the teacher's performance and maybe share out their performance. So that's where big data is going in the development world.
Additional thoughts?
The question kind of think that the gaps between like a low achieving segment of the population and a high achieving segment?
Right, the gap and the fact that the size of the bottom gap in most developed countries is growing at a very, very fast rate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think we need to look very hard to try to understand some of the explanations behind those trends. If you look here in New York City, we see that some communities have high concentrations of resources, really effective, really effectively trained teachers that are driving either growth in their students or receiving students that are very well prepared. And from just very peripheral understanding of what's happening in Denmark and what's happening in Denmark, I think that those countries aren't insulated from those kinds of trends either. In some ways, I think we're all observing across the world set of schools that are have rules well prepared students, kids that walk in knowing their basic alphabet, and a set of schools where students didn't pick up those very basic skills, and so those gaps begin to grow through the primary years and secondary years. We're all trying to grapple with how we reduce that gap with things like education technology and how we take into consideration, for example, that students are walking in with a different set of skills that need kind of instruction to grow and to meet other peers in the classroom that's walking in this situation. I think it's really fundamental. I mean, education technology is one part of it, and then the second part of it is just thinking very broadly about why different students perform at what the opportunities to add value
All right, great. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
My name is Vikas. Can any of you have any experience with technology being used to increase the motivation level for kids to show up in school? Sometimes the kids don't want to show up, or sometimes their parents don't want them to show up. Have there been any initiatives that you are aware of that have had an impact in affecting that or that?
So I'm just going to repeat the question so Nick can hear it. So he's asking, any information or experience around increasing the motivation of students wanting to go to school or getting to school, whether it be from the student's perspective or from the parent's perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think some of that depends on the region you're referring to. Whether it's Uganda or the Middle East or the UK.